Hello there, you're watching Left, Right and Centre on NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. The government has come in for a fresh attack from the opposition over China. Aam Aadmi Party's Arvind Kejriwal says that the government is pushing a false narrative that everything is fine, and the Congress is once again asking why the government is shying away from a discussion in Parliament. This on a day when the Delhi police starts aggressively tracking the AIIMS hacking case, which it suspects originated from China and Hong Kong. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi faced a cyber attack on the 23rd of November, paralyzing its servers for days. Subsequently, a case of extortion and cyber terrorism was registered. It is feared that sensitive medical data of many patients, including some top VVIPs, could have been compromised in the breach. Meanwhile, 6,000 attempts were made to hack into India's apex medical research body, ICMR. The failed attempts were made on the 30th of November. And then, on the 9th of December, a fresh attempt by Chinese PLA to transgress the LAC in the Tawang sector this time. An attack foiled by the Indian soldiers, but the incident a reminder of what India faced in Galwan in 2020. From the borders to cyber attacks, how should India deal with China? That's the question we are debating this evening on Left, Right and Centre.
सुनने में आता है कि चाइना कहीं पे इतने किलोमीटर अंदर घुस गया, चाइना कहीं पे इतने किलोमीटर अंदर घुस गया। भारत सरकार कहती है नहीं सब ठीक है।
और इस क्लीन चिट के कारण हमारा जो बार्गेनिंग पोजीशन है वो कमजोर हो गया है चीन के साथ।
चाहे गलवान हो तो तवांग, हमारी सेना ने जिस शौर्य और पराक्रम का परिचय दिया है उसकी जितनी भी प्रशंसा की जाए वह कम है। मैं बहुत ही विनम्रतापूर्वक निवेदन करता हूं कि हमने भी कभी किसी अपोजिशन के लीडर के इंटेंशन पर कभी क्वेश्चन मार्क नहीं लगाया। पॉलिसीज को लेकर हमने डिबेट किया। राजनीति सच बोलकर ही की जाती है, झूठ बोलकर लंबे समय तक राजनीति नहीं की जाती।
Let's get straight into our discussion. Joining me on the show, Congress spokesperson Manavendra Singh, Asif Bamla of the BJP, Priyanka Kakkar of the Aam Aadmi Party, former diplomat Vishnu Prakash Brahmachalani, strategic affairs expert, and Arna Tandon, senior fellow from China. Let me go across first to Manavendra Singh. While the Congress and the Aam Aadmi Party continue to call the Chinese PLA moves a land grab, the government has denied it, Manavendra Singh. Is this very claim of the government that the Congress is questioning? Is that the allegation that the Congress is levelling, that the government is indulging in a cover-up?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get your question properly because of network issue, but I think you asked a question about whether there's a cover-up attempted by the government. Is that correct?
Yes, whether that's the allegation by the Congress. Manavendra Singh, I think we've lost your connection. We'll reconnect with him in just a bit. Let me go across to Asif Bamla. Asif Bamla, why can't the government discuss the issue in Parliament as is being asked by the opposition parties? What's the problem there? What is the Parliament for if we can't discuss a matter related to national security?
Certainly, national security is a very sensitive issue, and the details that have to be let out will certainly be let out. The Parliament session is still on and yet to go. We already heard the Honourable Defence Minister. But what I'm trying to say is that we have our neighbours who are pretty disturbed because we know that this patch of northeast also, whether we consider that as the part of the mainstream India. We don't just let it as the northeast. And we know that projects worth 6,800 crore rupees of development is happening towards Tripura, Meghalaya, Arunachal. So that is something that is affecting our immediate neighbours, and that's something which is giving them goosebumps, you see. So the mantra with the Honourable Prime Minister is that via peace, dialogue and connectivity, and that is the approach.
But Asif Bamla, it's not just the eastern sector we are talking about. We have been seeing a standoff in the western sector as well from the year 2020. Manavendra Singh is back with us. Manavendra Singh,
no, I've
the question...
completed my section.
I'll come back to you, sir. The question I was asking you, is the Congress party levelling an allegation against the government that it doesn't want to discuss the matter in Parliament or otherwise because it's indulging in a cover-up? Because that's the kind of allegation that seems to be emerging from the AAP party as well, suggesting that there's been a land grab and there is no discussion on it.
Well, it's very obvious when the Parliament is in session and there is a crisis on your border. And if you're not willing to discuss it in Parliament, that means you're avoiding something which is uncomfortable for you. And there's no reason why, why there should not be a discussion. The Parliament has the right to discuss because, after all, it represents the people of India, and the people of India should know what what their representatives talk about national security matters. After all, even at the worst time of 1962 crisis, there was a discussion in Parliament. If you look at some of the great debates, unfortunately at that period, but Mr. Vajpayee really made his mark at that, in those days of the Indo-China conflict. I mean, that's why he came for great praise from Mr. Nehru as a future leader of India. So this is obviously the party of the same inheritance. Why they should shy from any discussion is obviously because there's something to cover up.
Oh, Brahmachalani, I want to bring you in here. Is the matter too sensitive to be discussed in parliamentary proceedings which are public, or is the government on the back foot? What exactly is your assessment of the situation at the LAC, both in the eastern and the western sector?
Well, firstly, discussion in Parliament should be part of India's public diplomacy to put pressure on China, to spotlight its aggression. And the government should allow a discussion in Parliament. In fact, there should be a welcome opportunity for the government to have a discussion, to present its case, to take the nation into confidence. So I think, I hope the government reconsiders its stance. A discussion in Parliament will certainly help India to spotlight China's aggression and to make it clear that there are costs that China will have to pay for its ongoing aggression. I think this overly defensive, cautious, and risk-averse approach needs to be shed. We need to have a much clearer strategy, because the present path is allowing China to have its cake and eat it too. For example, on one hand, China is waging aggression. On the other hand, China is reaping growing trade surplus with India, right through this 31-month border crisis that began with China's incursions into Eastern Ladakh in April and May 2020. China's trade surplus with India has been surging to the extent
That's an important point, Brahmachalani, that you've raised. I want to interrupt you there because I want to go across to Ainar Tangent first, and then I'll go across to Vishnu Prakash to ask him the question about whether India is actually imposing costs on China or not, and then we'll come to the issue of trade. Ainar Tangent, is China willfully ignoring the 93 and 96 agreements? What is the PLA, why in fact is the PLA transgressing the LAC, this time in the Tawang sector, even as the standoff in Eastern Ladakh is still ongoing?
Well, I mean, obviously, India has its narrative. China has a different narrative. They don't see this as a huge issue. There were not a lot of people injured during this period. And also, from the pictures you were showing, it appears that it's the Indian side that's being very aggressive, as you can see, hitting the Chinese troops with sticks while they do not respond. So this idea that, there's only one narrative, I think, you're going to have to take that with a grain of salt. In terms of the cyber attacks, those are allegations. Once again, in China, there are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of attacks of a similar nature on Chinese. Some of them are by private actors, some are by government actors. India is with AUKUS and also the Quad. That makes them allied with the largest spy network in the world, which is the Five Eyes, headed by the U.S.
India is not with the AUKUS. India is with the Quad, though.
It's with the Quad. It's allied with the United States on that, and that gives it access to the Five Eyes intelligence. There has been certified reports that the U.S. is sharing intelligence with India. I mean, this issue about ignoring things.
I'll just interrupt you there, sir.
Sure.
Because the question that any country would ask is, why should its relationship with another country be a problem for China? India is a sovereign country. It's allowed to take decisions for itself, which are in its best interest. Then what is the problem there?
Well, if you know, when the shoe's on the other foot, you seem to complain. There's a constant litany of complaints about India and Pakistan, China and Pakistan being put together, and that's seen as offensive to India. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, you should disregard who we're involved with while we get to criticize with your side.
Vishnu Prakash?
The issue here is that you have both sides building up infrastructure
answer that point that you've raised. You are equating China's relationship with Pakistan to India's relationship with the United States. Vishnu Prakash?
Good evening. There is a very big difference between the two relationships, because Pakistan-China nexus is directed against India. Pakistan is being used as a cat's paw to cause trouble in India. China is becoming the protector guardian of Pakistan, harboring terrorists, taking BRI or CPEC through the Indian territory, and so on and so forth. So there's a very big difference in that relationship, because it directly affects our security interests. Whereas the India-US relationship is not directed against any country. China and US also had a relationship, or still has a very strong relationship. That's nobody's talking of that. When China wanted G2, it was not directed against India. So the problem in the India-China-Pakistan relationship is that it is aimed partly to embarrass India, to cause complications.
Vishnu Prakash, then the question that arises, and something that Brahmachalani was raising, is why doesn't India impose enough cost on China? After all, the trade has only grown skewed in favor of China, despite the border dispute, or rather the border friction that we have seen, standoff we have seen in just this 1 year. China's exports to India have gone up by 34.5%, while India's exports to China have declined by 35.3%.
Very true, and that is something which is a cause of concern. And every effort is being made to reduce the trade deficit, and decouple wherever it is possible. Now, some steps have already been taken. For example, G5, or the projects that China used to be getting, or the apps. Efforts are being made now to reduce imports of toys, etc., through PLI scheme. Now, the thing is that India has a strong trade dependence on China, and the kind of imports that we are getting, what we are importing from China are electronics, machinery, chemicals, and so on and so forth, for which it will take time to find alternative sources of supply.
Okay, so Priyanka Kakkar, sir, I want to go across to Priyanka Kakkar. We haven't still gone across to our last panelist here. Priyanka Kakkar, what reward is the Aam Aadmi Party talking about then? Because we've heard Arvind Kejriwal say that China is being rewarded, even as they are holding this aggression against India. The government is rewarding them. What kind of reward are you talking about? Are you talking about the trade that is growing with China, or costs not being imposed? Is that the direction in which you're pointing towards?
Good evening, Maha. Yes, that is correct, and I disagree with Vishnu, sir, because since 2014 to 2022, the imports from China have doubled, exactly doubled. And you already gave the figures of export. Overall, the export from China to India stands at 3%. And the imports are at $115.44 billion. That is one thing. Secondly, since Maha, you were asking whether it is the strategy of the government not to discuss these issues, that is correct, because their own MP, Tapir Gaoji from Arunachal East, he in 2019 also in Lok Sabha said that the next Doklam will be in Arunachal if proper steps are not taken. That has happened too. So he was pleading with his own government to speak about these issues and to take them seriously. This year in February or March, a youth from the Arunachal Pradesh was abducted by the Communist Party of China, the Chinese army. Then we see, it appears to us that the BJP is mocking the sacrifice of our soldiers constantly. And why I say this is, one, there is a video of the PM sir which says that व्यापारी ज्यादा साहसी होता है हमारे सेना के जवानों से. Second, there is a.
But Priyanka Kakkar, the government says that when the opposition continues to question things regarding the LAC, they are bringing down the morale of the soldiers. Asif Bamla, I want to come to you. Priyanka Kakkar has raised the issue of trade.
That is an incorrect argument.
Okay, Priyanka Kakkar has raised the issue of trade, so has Brahmachalani. There was a boycott China products call. Has all of that failed, or was it just rhetoric?
No, can I rebut?
Yes, please go ahead.
Maha, you see, I would like to question my fellow colleagues from the Aam Aadmi and the Congress. They're talking about huge optics, but they've always lowered the morale of our armed forces. Coming to Congress again,
of course, armed forces, please don't divert.
Listen to me. Now, I did not rebut. I did not interject when you were speaking. So please give me a fair time. I don't think I should be debating.
Asif Bamla, Priyanka Kakkar, just a second. Priyanka Kakkar, 1 second. Asif Bamla, the only point that the only point that the opposition is raising, which she is objecting to, is that they don't intend bringing the morale down of the soldiers. They are questioning the government. Go ahead, now respond.
Okay. Now, it's not that the parliament session is over and that there's no discussion further to go on. So that's one point. Number two, if as far as Aam Aadmi is concerned, it's very restricted and confined to the Delhi Municipal Corporation and to a few states that they've managed to. So let me come back to a Congress party. Let me speak about the Congress party, who was, when it was in power, it was the one who gave up about 38,000 square meters of land. And what has the Congress done in the Northeast? Let me tell you, A.K. Anthony in the parliament mentioned that A.K. Anthony in the parliament mentioned that why should we develop don't
run away from my
border areas,
I am the opposition,
which are close to Arunachal Pradesh. And you see the
kind
of development today the Honorable Prime Minister is doing. And you see,
why are you increasing imports year after year?
All right, Asif Bamla is levelling allegations against the Congress party as well. So let's get a response from Manavendra Singh. Manavendra Singh, first of all, respond to those charges. Also, there have been attempts at cyber attacks. The AIIMS servers were compromised as well. Sensitive medical data could have been compromised. Do you think that a more encompassing debate is required in Parliament?
Now they're doing wars on cyber.
Of course, a debate is required in Parliament. And all-encompassing debate is required in Parliament. I think the country needs to understand the nature of the Chinese threat. And I think the country needs to understand the nature of the Chinese government. After all, this is it's a great civilization. The Chinese have contributed enormously to the world. But communist China is very different than the ancient China, which India had a huge relationship with, a very deep relationship. And with the fact that this communist China has a different look towards the world, particularly towards the borders, whether it's South China Sea, whether it's towards the Ladakh region, Arunachal, that these matters have to be debated in Parliament. The country should be exposed. I mean, the details of these discussions should be shared with the people of India, because after all, it's their land which is under threat. It's under threat from a book.
Brahmachalani, how serious do you think these hacking attempts are?
Well, China has long waged unrestricted warfare, and that unrestricted warfare has been waged below the threshold of armed conflict. It targets the opponent's weak spots. And China's shadow war seeks to employ all available means short of open war to curtail Indian ambitions and strike at core Indian interests. For example, state-sponsored Chinese hackers have repeatedly targeted critical infrastructure in India, including power grids, which resulted in a major power outage in Mumbai in October 2020. But I think there is a more fundamental point that we should note, which is that India's deterrence strategy against China isn't working. It's not working because India refuses to grasp that deterrence is not just about military strength. To be effective, deterrence must extend to the use of all available tools. It must be comprehensive in nature and aimed at making aggression costly for China. But I think one other point is worth noting, which is that India's shortcomings are obvious, but they should not obscure China's own short-sightedness. Xi Jinping's aggression against India promises to prove costly for China in the long run. In the short run, they are reaping growing profits from the trade surplus with India. But in the long run, what they're doing, they're turning a once friendly India into a long-term adversary.
All right.
This is not to China's own advantage.
Let me take that question with Ainar Tangent. Ainar, is China putting too much at stake over the border issue that it is constantly picking up?
Well, you could reverse that question. Is it India or is it China that is trying to make this an issue? Remember, there's been nothing except internal squabbling that has prevented India from finding a way to take its people and put them into the middle class, to raise its economy so that it's a more potent economic interest and to satisfy the needs of its people. China has been able to do that. So there's no question that China is some big evil empire intent on dominating other countries. They're simply trying to trade because they have a very low per person ratio of resources. So they have no choice but to trade. They would like to trade with India. The first thing that Xi Jinping said in 2013 is the relationship between India and China would determine the future of the Asian century. I still think that that is true. The question is, do you want to engage in these kind of sidelights, very minor issues, or is there a way in which the two countries can cooperate together? They are, after all, civilization nations.
Ainar Tangent, from India's perspective, certainly this is not a minor issue, considering that in 2020, India lost 20 of its soldiers. China may not have revealed the exact number of the soldiers it lost, but India does value its soldiers.
It revealed that there were 4.
It doesn't want to put its soldiers on the front line, just to die because there is aggression from the other side.
You have soldiers dying on almost all your fronts, in Kashmir and in Pakistan. You do not have many soldiers except during that one incident.
We're sorry to say, your statements should be stand corrected. Okay?
I will let you give you the floor.
Mr. Ainar, I think your statement
does
should
not
be
make you superior.
Asif Bamla wants to come in. He is rebutting that statement you are making.
Well, if you let me finish, it would be easier for him to rebut. He seems to be interested in.
You see, the problem is that.
Let him respond because there is a factual error in that. Asif Bamla, go ahead.
The problem with that is China is facing the heat when it comes to on ground, because certainly we have concentrated, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi, has concentrated on these border areas which earlier were not being looked at. So now they're looking at for more for different avenues to trouble. I mean, in terms of the cyberspace. But we are also going ahead with the blockchain technology, and we are on the verge, as it is, we are on the verge of leading the digital technology also. So you don't have to be too happy about it. But let me tell you that that what you're exhibiting on a national channel, that Indian soldiers have been killed. So you yourself are submitting to the world the arrangement, the mindset which China originally comes up with. While we have seen that our soldiers,
I don't even know I understand
our soldiers have fought tooth and nail on all platforms, and now that you guys have not been able to, so now, but with this cyber space thing that you've come out also, I'm sure with the digital technology and with the decentralization of the database, we will be able to secure.
All right, I think I'll give 30 seconds to Manavendra Singh as well. He also wanted to respond to what Ainar Tangent said. Manavendra Singh.
Yeah, I think that's a very insensitive comment your guest made. I think it's inaccurate, it's insensitive, And it's an insult to the Indian people as a whole and to the armed forces specifically to label anything as, a death as a routine matter. It's a tragedy, and you can't sort of you can't lower any death, and particularly that of a soldier, as a
well, I never did. I pointed out that you have soldiers dying on a number of fronts, not necessarily on the Chinese front, except for the 20 that died during the Galwan
callousness
Clash.
is unacceptable. For as an Indian,
the manner in which that statement was made,
people like to make personal attacks when they
not
don't
well
have
taken. The manner in which that statement
arguments.
was made,
That was certainly not acceptable. I think you should apologize.
as I said, Ainar Tangent, that India respects its soldiers, and each life is precious
and
of
so
a
does
soldier.
China.
That is why India was the first to come out with the number of soldiers who were martyred or dead because of the clash in Galwan. But China did not put out the number of soldiers that had died on its side. It just shows the manner in which the army is viewed by each side, isn't it?
No,
Final 30 seconds.
I mean, what we have here is a situation where both sides claim the other one started it. There were basically infrastructures being set up on both sides of this imaginary line, which no one knows exactly where it exists, and this is leading to tensions. When you have soldiers who are confronting each other eyeball to eyeball, invariably there's going to be some sort of fisticuffs reactions. We're just lucky that it has not been with rifles and bullets.
15 seconds to Brahmachalani to
pushing
counter
and shoving and clubs.
15 seconds, Brahmachalani.
Well, Mr. Tangent is very good at uttering the propaganda on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, and this is hardly a debate.
You should use arguments.
This kind of propaganda will not sell. The facts are clear. Revisionist history is the strength of the Chinese Communist Party, but there are few buyers of revisionist history, even within China.
All right, we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that, and thanks to all our panelists for joining us here on the discussion. The crux of the matter is that the Chinese side needs to discuss this issue, and the kind of build-up of their forces and ammunition that has been seen at the LAC, that disengagement and de-escalation needs to take place, and also a discussion is required in Parliament so that everybody is on the same page on the matter. They know exactly what is happening on the border as well. That's the demand of the opposition. With that, we're taking a very quick break. Up next, We the People with Sarah Jacob.